Hello, welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. Smash the like button if you love me. Subscribe if you're new. Please have your say. A very warm welcome to Friday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. Your headlines today. There are real rumors coming out that the Batman 2 production start date has been delayed. But the more exciting rumor is that the Joker will be involved with Matt Reeves' Batman sequel as well. And Andy Muschietti can't stop digging himself a crater. He says the Flash movie honours the Snyderverse and he hopes that Zack Snyder watches the movie. Wow, that's some crater you are digging for yourself, Andy boy. But first of all, the main headline. Rumours suggest that the Batman 2 will be delayed till March 2024. The production date is rumoured to be delayed till March 2024. Are there any validity in these rumours? Absolutely yes. Right now we're in the middle of the WGA, the Writers Guild of America's industrial action. The writers in Hollywood are on strike. Now, the last industrial action by the WGA lasted for around 100 days. And the issues behind this industrial action are a lot more complex and complicated. It's not just about more money, although that's an important element of the industrial action. There's also kind of a divide in Hollywood about artificial intelligence and how it should be used, because right now it's reducing the role of the human writer. Are they human beings writers? I don't know, you tell me. I'm a writer, I'm a human being. Anyway, now there's an added complexity to maybe why there's a delay to the Batman 2 as well. SAG-AFTRA, the Hollywood Actors Union, are about to vote to decide whether they should take industrial action as well. And it's more than likely that Matt Reeves and Warner Brothers Discovery know they're going to vote to take industrial action and that talks with Hollywood are going to break down. That would mean the writers and the actors would both be taking industrial action at the same time. You can make an already written movie, but you can't make a movie without actors if they're on strike. So this is probably why the movie's production start date isn't till March of 2024. I'm not frustrated by this because also Matt Reeves is a notorious slow worker in terms of making a film, and it wouldn't surprise me if this is just the Matt Reeves thing. He thought he could start at some point this year, then decided to go back. I don't know. It could be just respecting the Writers Guild of America and just delaying it because of that. I think the strikes have certainly got something to do with it, but Matt Reeves is notoriously a slow worker. Now, considering how great the first Batman movie is, Matt, you take as long as you can, boy. You take your time. I'm absolutely fine with all of that. That isn't a problem. I can assure you of that. Take your time. I'm in no rush. Superman Legacy production start date isn't till next year as well, and they're going to release their movie, on time, hopefully on time anyway, of July 2025. So the Batman can still be released in 2025. So this actually isn't a big deal. So that's the rumor. Now here's another rumor from the same film. The Batman sequel is said to bring back the Joker to that movie. Now I always felt when Matt introduced the Joker in his movie, we were going to see him in the sequel. Matt said it wasn't a tie-in for the next movie, but Christopher Nolan said the Joker card at the end of Batman Begins wasn't a hint about Joker being the villain in The Dark Knight. I never believed Chris, and I never believed Matt Reeves when he said it didn't necessarily mean that the Joker would be in the Batman sequel. I always felt the Joker it was going to be in the Batman sequel. So I'm not surprised about this rumor. I believe both of these rumors are absolutely true. I believe the start date will be delayed, and it makes absolute sense for a multitude of reasons. And I always believed the Joker would be involved in Matt Reeves' The Batman 2. I'm hoping it's not just going to be called The Batman 2, but it looks like it will be. I would like a proper title to that film. So anyway, moving on, Andy Muschietti continues to dig himself a crater of a hole. This time, he's not content with doubling down on his support for Ezra Miller. He's now saying that the Flash movie honours the Snyderverse, honours director Zack Snyder's DC work within Man of Steel, BVS, and the Snyder Cut. So, within the film, does the Flash movie honour and respect the Snyderverse? This is a very, very complicated thing to answer. Now, I saw an unfinished version of the Flash movie for a test screening. I did that a very long time ago, so I don't have a complete picture of what this film is, but I did see a beginning, middle, and ending. That's what I did. So whatever the film is, when it's released, I'll go and check it, and I'll compare it when I do my spoiler review, and we'll get more information about that. That's what's so good about following this channel. But does it honour the Snyderverse? That's an interesting question to answer. Well, I'll tell you. I don't think the movie attempts purposely to disrespect Snyder's work. Now, when I say this, I mean the director tries to be respectful towards through Zack Snyder as a director, because the Flash movie treads within the worlds of Zack Snyder's DC. It treads heavily in Man of Steel, and when I say heavily, they really do focus on the fact that, now obviously originally this movie wasn't going to be released 10 years after the release of Man of Steel, but ultimately that's what's ended up happening. So I don't think the film, in terms of Andy Muschietti isn't looking to disrespect this movie. But this movie does tread in Man of Steel, a movie starring Henry Cavill as Superman. Guess what? The Flash movie hasn't got hide nor hair from what I saw of Henry Cavill in this movie. Don't be surprised though if Henry Cavill's Superman shockingly does turn up in the final cut of the Flash movie in the post-credit scenes. I think there will be a couple of post-credit scenes. Andy and Barbara have teased big surprises, fun surprises. So don't be surprised if Henry doesn't turn up in some post-credit scene. Don't be surprised, in fact, if the Batfleck, you have to find me, Barry, original post-credit scene also doesn't turn up. I think we could be having some very interesting surprises. From what I saw in the Flash movie, it doesn't disrespect the Snyderverse. It doesn't end the Snyderverse. All it does, it takes the Snyderverse out of the central DC universe. That's all it does. It doesn't end the Snyderverse. The Snyderverse is an elseworld after the Flash movie. It's out there somewhere. So let's be clear about that. But is it a good thing to say that we're honouring the Snyderverse when Henry Cavill isn't in the Flash movie? I think it's very, very complicated. Now, Snyderverse fans are not going to take too kindly to the fact that they're using Henry Cavill to sell this movie after Henry Cavill was brought back as Superman, then fired a few months later. That's disgusting. Henry Cavill wasn't asked to be involved in the Flash movie from the very beginning. So how do you honour the Snyderverse by subtracting Henry Cavill from this movie in the first place? And then, he says, I'd love Zack Snyder to see this movie. Zack Snyder's another gentleman like Henry Cavill. I'm sure he would be willing to see this movie. He is a very busy man right now, by the way. Lots of Rebel Moon stuff going to be kicking off in the next few weeks, so I hear. We may even get a full trailer. Don't be surprised, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that film because I love the works of Zack Snyder. But it's a complicated thing to say. We believe this film honours the Snyderverse. I think it's a weird thing to say if you ask me. I think it's a weird thing to say because I just think it is. I just look because at the end of the day, right, you can make a film that treads into somebody's movie, and you may not disrespect it. Now, listen, that's the reason that DJ Des Jarding, the VFX supervisor, and his VFX team, the same people who have worked with Zack Snyder on a multitude of occasions, were put on this movie to do the VFX because they understand, you know, the nuances of the way Zack brings his VFX to life. They worked on Man of Steel. That's why they're involved in this film. That's the only reason they were brought on. They were attempting to try and respect what Zack did in Man of Steel. And it's a very delicate thing to tread in somebody else's film. And, you know, you'll be able to see when you go and see, if and when you go and see the Flash movie. And it'll be interesting to get everyone's reaction when they do tread in the Man of Steel film, when they do the alternate version of Man of Steel in the Flashpoint universe. Does it look like Man of Steel? Because it's an alternate Flashpoint universe, it can look different. They're not literally treading in that film in that moment, but then there's other situations within that film where they actually are treading in the proper Man of Steel movie, because they're attempting to put Barry Allen, you know, in the Battle of Metropolis as well, helping out. So that it's very, very important that when you're doing something like this, because it is delicate, because they did this with Back to the Future 2. Marty treads in Back to the Future 1. The difference is that the director who directed the first film directed like the second and third movie. So, you know, he knew exactly how to tread in his own movie. So you can bring DJ Des Jardin and his VFX team into the Flash movie. You can have the paintbrush and the paint, but without the artist, it's a lot more tricky to create and perfect what that artist did in the first place. Of course, I'm talking about Zack Snyder. So you can attempt to do this. It is what I think the premise of this movie was very, very risky from the beginning. I understand the mentality of the Flash movie. It's a movie that wants to rewrite the DCEU. That was the original plan from Hamada. Rewrite it, create a new timeline. I understand why they were making a Flash movie, why they were using the Speed Force to rewrite the DCEU. But it's all very, very weird to me. It's bad enough that you're subtracting Henry Cavill's Superman from this movie. You're treading in Man of Steel, but you don't want to use Henry Cavill. I would have thought if you don't want to use Henry Cavill, maybe don't tread in his movie, because isn't that a bit of a problem? Couldn't that hurt you? You're treading in a movie without the main character. You know, weren't you afraid of triggering people? Didn't you think that the one thing people are going to be thinking about as you tread in that movie is where the fuck is Henry Cavill? Why have we got Flashpoint Supergirl instead of Flashpoint Superman? What is your fucking problem with Superman? These decisions were ill-conceived, and none of them really made sense, because when Supergirl was first announced for the Flash movie, we were all very, very excited, because we made a mistaken assumption, because we forgot we're dealing with some crazy people in Hollywood, but we assumed that Sasha Supergirl and Henry Superman would be on screen together. But that's very sad. It looks like we're not going to see that, or maybe we will. Maybe there's a surprise post-credit scene. Maybe Henry Cavill is actually going to cameo in this movie. I'm not going to say that it's an impossibility at this moment. It wouldn't surprise me if that, in fact, happens. So, yes, he reckons he honours the Snyderverse and that Zack Snyder should go and see the movie. As I say, I don't think these are good statements. These are statements that can get you in a lot of trouble, considering the pains this movie went to basically scrub out Henry Cavill's Superman. But then they've got the cheek to try and use Henry to sell their movie. And a lot of Snyder fans are coming out and saying the same thing. And to be honest with you, I can't say I blame you guys. I'm a Snyder fan myself, but ultimately, I'm a DC fan. I'm not here for Zack. I'm not here for Gunn. I'm here for me and I'm here for DC. I'm here for entertainment. I'm here for great stories. This is what me and this channel will always be about. So let's move on. Let's stay on the subject of The Flash and let's talk about Michael Keaton. So Andy Muschietti has also doubled down, saying that Michael Keaton, in his mind, was never going to reject the opportunity to return. But was The Flash movie the right place for Michael Keaton's Batman to return? Andy has also confirmed that this is the version of Batman from both Tim Burton movies. I repeat, this is not some alternate version of Batman. This is the same Batman. But before we answer the first question, by the way, if this was the right place for Michael Keaton's Batman, how can it be Michael Keaton's Batman? Get in the comments and let me know. What do you think? How can this be Michael Keaton's Batman? I mean, how can this be Tim Burton's Michael Keaton Batman? How can it be? Right, we're in an alternate Flashpoint universe. So how does Michael Keaton's Tim Burton's Batman? He's saying this is the version from those other Tim Burton movies. But this is an alternate Flashpoint universe. So how can that be the same Batman? How is this Batman in that universe? And don't forget, in the original version of this film, we go from him being the Flashpoint Batman to the main Batman in the DC Extended Universe by the end of the movie, when Barry goes back to his world. And it's not his world anymore because he's rewritten it, right? Basically, what this is a rebooting of the universe. We've seen this in DC Comics before, where the Flash, using the Speed Force, reboots the entire DC Comics universe. And in a way, the same thing's happening here, I suppose. But how can it be the same Batman? First of all, how can I don't want to give you any spoilers, but from what happens to Batman, Michael Keaton's Batman in the Flashpoint universe, clearly, how can that Batman in the Flashpoint universe be the same Batman who ends up originally in the new DCEU? But that's what they were claiming, right? Because he remembers Barry, as does Sasha Calle. And what happens to Keaton in the Flashpoint universe happens to Calle's Supergirl as well. So that element of it doesn't really make sense. But how do you say that Michael Keaton's Batman 89 and Batman Returns Batman is the same Batman who turns up in this new Flashpoint universe? That doesn't make sense. It's all right for Andy to say it's the same Batman. I understand why they want it to be the same Batman. I certainly wouldn't be going around saying or making it a different Batman, because that would be an even bigger clusterfuck. Let's go back to my original question. Was the Flash movie the right place to bring Michael Keaton's Batman back after all these years? My personal dream would have been for Michael Keaton and Tim Burton to reunite for a Batman 3, because they made two Batmans. So my dream would have been, rather than him turn up in this movie, that they made a third Batman movie together. And there's look, yes, he's around 80 years old, but if you're clever, there's some interesting things you can still do with this Batman. You just have an able-bodied Robin around him. There's lots of different things you can do. You can have a Robin, you can have a Batgirl, and he's the older statesman. He's the older Batman, if you like. It would have worked. I think making a third Batman movie, directed by Tim Burton, starring Michael Keaton, was a much better idea than bringing Michael Keaton to the Flash movie. I've told you what I think about this before. Thomas Wayne should have been the alternate Flashpoint Batman like he is in the Flashpoint graphic novel. And swapping Thomas Wayne for Michael Keaton's Batman is a cheap trick, because they had no faith in the movie and they had no faith in Ezra Miller being able to sell this movie and put butts in seats. If the Flash can't put butts in seats. Why are you making a movie about him at the end of the day? It doesn't really make sense to me. I'm asking you, does it make sense to you? You had no trust in Ezra Miller, and this was before, their conduct in the real world. They had no trust that this person could bring audiences to watch a Flash movie, which is really, really strange if you ask me. So that was the situation. So I would have brought in Jeffrey Dean Morgan to reprise his role as Thomas Wayne. So we see him in the opening, title sequences of Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice. And that's who I would have brought back to play Thomas Wayne. He's a very powerful actor. It would have worked. They should have been a lot more faithful to the Flashpoint graphic novel than they was, because they really wasn't that interested in the Flashpoint story. They wanted to use the Flashpoint story to create a new timeline so they could scrub out the Snyderverse from the central universe, which is exactly what they're doing, because they believe the Snyderverse is bad for business. They believe, a mid-smiley, bright-coloured universe, a connected universe is what everyone wants. But we're in a very dangerous time for comic book superhero franchises, because that trend is over, my friend. And I can see movies like Joker 2 and Batman 2 doing a lot of money, but films within the new DC universe may struggle, because I think the audiences are more interested in Elseworld stories rather than connected universe stories. The MCU doesn't even trend anymore. The MCU isn't the be-all and end-all of everything. People don't get excited just by the mention of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We don't stand and salute every time Kevin Feige stands on a stage. Times have changed, and so must Hollywood. But change is something that Hollywood doesn't like to implement. It likes to pretend it's very modern and it's very inclusive, but this is an entertainment universe, a town that doesn't like outsiders and it doesn't like change. Make no mistake about that. That's why this industry right now is as dead as Elvis, although there is a rumour that he lives on the same island as President Kennedy, Princess Diana and Marilyn Monroe. I wouldn't mind visiting that island. But anyway, I'm joking. Not funny, Mick. It's not funny. Anyway, but it's a dead, Hollywood is dead right now, especially with all this industrial action going along. And I think it's going to be kind of interesting if the removal of Snyder actually works. And it's fascinating because if you look at the removal of Snyder since 2016, it hasn't really worked. A movie he helped set up, Wonder Woman, did brilliantly well. Aquaman, a movie he helped set up as well, that's a fact, did really well. But then you see when his influence leaves, how the interest in the movies leaves. Because whether you loved or hated the Snyderverse, you talked about it. You had an opinion about it. Zack always said himself, I don't mind people talking about my movies, whether it's good or bad. I don't mind, as long as they're talking about what we're doing. And I think that's an interesting attitude from Zack Snyder. No news is good, no news is bad news, right? And, Snyder doesn't really mind people talking shit about him. His fans mind you talking shit about him, but he doesn't. He likes that. He likes stirring the pot. He likes hot takes. He likes triggering audiences. This is the kind of world we live in today. But when you look at what we've had since the Shazam movie, the box office and the interest to the DC Extended Universe has gone downhill even more and more with each movie release. And there's a reason for that, because there's nothing to talk about. There wasn't really many major talking points in terms of Shazam, Wonder Woman 84, Birds of Prey. The Suicide Squad was a really good movie, but it didn't have something to talk about. It was a movie, it happened, it was gone, and then you forgot about it. The Snyder's movies are a lot different to that. So, as I say, it's very, very interesting. Now, for me, personally, I would call Zack Snyder up now and get him involved in the DC Elseworlds. I would put him in charge of DC Elseworlds, either to do his own thing there and make individual standalone movies, or to continue his Snyderverse. I suppose an interesting way of doing it is maybe if you didn't continue the Snyderverse, but kind of made kind of other kind of, standalone Elseworld movies. That could be an interesting compromise. I think his fans would be triggered at first, but would be excited in what he would do. I mean, ultimately, I would love him to continue and conclude his Snyderverse plan. That's what I think why he's not involved with DC Elseworlds is weird, but he's not. There's a future now without Zack Snyder, and James Gunn is a prominent writer-director, but can he pull it off? In an era where these superheroes and these characters are not trends. Look, a good comic book movie will always make money and will always garner the interest of the public and the fans. But we're not at the place where it was a trend, and people have become very cynical where it comes to Hollywood. People have become very cynical when it comes to comic book movies as well. And I think that's an interesting thing to talk about as well. We're going to see very shortly in the next 2 weeks, how the Flash movie does. We had higher hopes for it a few weeks ago. Then when we got the kind of the projections for it, they were a lot lower than we ever thought they'd be. But in a lot of ways, it's not a surprise. There's people who don't like Ezra Miller. There's people who are angry the way Snyder was treated, the way Henry Cavill was treated. Even James Gunn, when he confirmed that he would not be continuing with Henry Cavill as Superman, admitted that Henry Cavill had been treated badly. But typical of Hollywood, there's no details of that. James, why don't you get into it a bit more? Who's to blame for the bad treatment of Henry Cavill? Walter Hamada, Toby Emmerich, and a lot more people. In fact, the man that, is in charge of Warner Brothers now, David Zaslav, he was in charge when Henry Cavill was announced to be coming back as Superman. 1 minute he's back, then he's not. It's not a good look. That's the past. It happened a few months back, but it still ain't a good look. And I say, heaven help them when they announce that new Superman. He better be good. He better be the best thing ever. They are looking to bring in a Superman. They are opening casting calls, as we've mentioned many times before. But it's going to be interesting who they cast. Is it going to be a diverse casting? Is it going to be a white actor? These are the things that we don't know at this point. And the truth is, we don't know how far in the casting process they're in. And, we may have to wait a very long time until they confirm an actor for Superman in Superman Legacy. And if there is a SAG-AFTRA, actors union strike as well, that complicates things, because I don't think actors, because I think they've all got to be part of the union, would be able to audition for anything. So if SAG-AFTRA, the union, the actors union, decide to take industrial action, Hollywood will just, come to a standstill. It's pretty much already come to a standstill because they're respecting the writers trying to fight for their rights. So, when I hear things are being developed and things, nothing's being developed in Hollywood right now. A studio can announce a project, but they can't start writing it. They can't start developing anything. So it's a really weird time to be a fan of stories, to be a fan of movies and TV. For a while now, I've been re-watching my favourite TV series. I started with Doctor Who. I rewatched Quantum Leap. I rewatched Alias. I'm rewatching Lost, one of the best television shows I've ever seen. And I'm considering doing a short video about Lost because it means a hell of a lot to me. A very personal TV show with lots of personal stories about the human condition. And they're the best stories to tell. So we still live in this weird kind of, scape of waiting to see what the new DC universe does, but also watching this Flash movie that has nothing to do with the future, not really, apart from kind of setting up a new future, but you're not really going to see anything on that new future in this movie. Or will you? Is that the big surprise, or one of the big surprises Andy and Barbara are talking about? Could we see the new Superman or Batman in this movie? It would be unlikely, but if you wanted to get people excited, that's what you could do. But of course, you'd have to cast them first, and as far as we know, that hasn't happened. But who knows? Funnier things have happened, right? But you know what will be the more pragmatic thing to do as a surprise in this movie? Give us a Blue Beetle post-credit scene. Because right now, Blue Beetle stands to make very little money at the box office. It needs something. And what it could do with is some kind of cameo in the Flash movie, which I doubt they've been that visionary to do. But at the very least, give the character a post-credit scene in this movie. And if they haven't done that, that's very, very short-sighted of them. This has been Friday's edition of the DC Universe Daily with me, Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. Smash the like button. If you love me, subscribe if you're new. Please have your say. I will see you again for Saturday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. Until then, until I see you again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.